whatever your main focus is, whatever is in your heart, that's what I really want to do. Do all of them.
Mhm.
Explore all the others in a very committed, intentional way, and you're going to grow across the board because you never know what pieces you're going to need.
Mhm.
Hey, I'm Lara, an artist, educator, and entrepreneur who's danced through life in Australia, London, and California. Now I'm an Aussie in Atlanta, Georgia, USA. Juggling roles as an artist, ex-dancer, current actor, author, professional educator, and qualified life coach, I'm also a wife and mother of 2. Join me on this podcast crafted for creative souls at every level, entrepreneurs, artists, dreamers, and hope-filled humans alike. I'm here to guide you towards a life of love, purpose, adventure, and boundless creativity. As a healthy, wealthy, and wise creative soul, I invite you to hit subscribe for weekly inspiration. Anticipate solo episodes, exclusive interviews with creative luminaries, and insightful discussions with my hottie hubby, Andrew, a specialist performance physical therapist, as we delve into the dynamics of relationships and more. Dive into a 360-degree view of making a creative life you'll love. This episode's going to be a treat because I have 2 powerhouse storyteller women that are multifaceted in what they offer creatively. I have Cheryl McKay, who's actually created These Stones TV series, which you can watch, and we'll tell you more about that in this episode. And also the director, who's multifaceted herself, Susan, that will resonate with you no matter what your artistic medium. The creative secrets of These Stones will inspire whatever you're doing, whether it's collaborative or solo work. We're going to go behind the scenes to the creative process in crafting this incredible supernatural drama. Welcome, ladies. Before we dive into the heart of These Stones in your incredible journey as storytellers, Cheryl, could you share a little bit about what inspired the creation of this series? What drew you to the supernatural drama with biblical undertones?
Sure. It was really cool because a friend of mine named Jeanette Town, we had started talking about wanting to make a project together. And she came to me one day and she's like, my pastor wrote this fascinating, he started as a play and then was turning it into a book manuscript. His name's Tim Stevenson. And he was working with this co-author in his church named Peggy Porter. And she's like, it's got this really cool idea. Would you take a look at it? And so I read what they came up with and I was like, this is an awesome idea. It was based on like Matthew 27, where there's this verse that sounds kind of crazy. It's like Jesus dies on the cross and he's resurrected. And then all of a sudden it says the tombs broke open and then all the saints rose from the dead and started walking around and talking to people. And it's like, what? What are you talking about? Like, that's a weird verse that everyone just kind of probably goes,
we just brush over it, don't we, Cheryl?
Okay. And so, but what he did, the brilliance of what Tim thought of was like, well, the Bible doesn't tell us what happened to them. What if he played with a fictionalized version of like, well, what if they never left? What if they're still here helping people? And so I had the chance to look at that and I'm like, yes, Jeanette, I agree with you. This should be made into something. And I'm like, but I think it's a TV series because there's no shortage of Bible characters that died before Jesus that would be called saints by the Lord, that could be considered for the show. And so from there it was like, well, how do we turn it into a TV show? And then, so I thought through, the concept that I came up with was like, what if these Bible characters are working undercover today and they have to fit in like they belong today. And then they're allowed to reveal who they are at the right time, like a touched by an angel moment where the light, but that way they have a chance to talk like as if they belong today, but then later they're able to tell about their real Bible story. So, and then at the heart of that, I really wanted people that we could follow every week. And so I created the Stewart family headed by Madeline Carroll's character, McKenna. She's like the unwilling servant at times who gets roped into this. And she gets to be the character who matches the person in crisis with the person from the Bible.
I would so love to have this happen to me in real life. Having seen it, it's just so adventurous and it really is so intriguing to actually watch the way that you transform the characters from modern day to the historical look. It's very creative. Susan, let me ask you, These Stones combine supernatural elements with biblical characters. So as director, how did you balance creative freedom with respect to the source material?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it goes back to what Cheryl was saying about this what if. And also you said something about wouldn't it be nice if this was happening, if this were happening in real life? But the fact is it is.
Mm.
And that's the dimension that we need to see, that this spiritual dimension is real.
Mm.
And Jesus told parables. And what we're doing with this is something like that. We're taking that what if and springing into this allegory. This story is an allegory, but it's really like the parables, speaking deeper truths into our real lives. And so when we look at the Bible, and you're talking about balancing creative freedom and respecting what's going on with the biblical narrative, and we look at this thing that at first may strike us as strange or weird, as Cheryl said,
Yeah.
and, but I just felt like we're respecting the fact that this thing happened. Okay, we don't know if the saints lived on or if they died. There are only two possibilities there,
Mm.
and so we're not really taking a theological stance on whether they lived or died. But what we're doing is springboarding into an allegory so that we're seeing the biblical characters figuratively, just like in a parable, things symbolize other things and help us to understand what's going on. And McKenna's story is like the story of the parable that is created to represent deeper truths as well that are tracking along with that. And so what we're doing, nobody's seeing dead people. There's no
Yeah, that's true.
concern. There's nothing like that. This is a figurative allegory, like a parable that
Mm.
is geared at helping people to see the Word of God as an interactive
Mm.
experience, and to experience when they read the Bible that they're not. It's just this is to help these Bible characters jump off the page for them. And when you're reading the Bible and you read a verse or you read a story in the Bible and something resonates inside you
Yeah.
with truth for your life in that moment. That's what we're doing, encouraging people to read the Bible and to experience God and His Word that way.
I love what you said about the question, what if?
What happens when you're trying to balance this freedom, creative freedom, with respecting the narrative? There's a funny thing that happens. We looked at these biblical people and we put them on pedestals, and that creates an imbalance because really you can't relate to a biblical character if they're on a pedestal because you're here
Yeah.
and you're seeing them there, and
Yeah.
they seem like superhuman or something. But the Bible says that Elijah was a human being just like we are. Okay, and so what happens is that when we see the Bible, when we respect the Bible for what it really is, and the people of the Bible for who they really were, we realize they're human, and all of a sudden, that gives us the balance. The truth gives us the balance that gives us the freedom to relate to them in their humanity.
I love that. And I'm loving hearing the way that you're approaching it too. And it's absolute truth, of course. But the question that came up, what if, is what I heard you say. And I love that. Both Cheryl and Susan both said it. But I love that about artists and creativity, is that the question, what if, is part of that mandate. What if we tried this? What if it looked like this? I mean, it's absolutely incredible. Cheryl, your work often adapts books into screenplays. You're an incredible screenwriter, but other writer as well, all kinds of writer.
Thank
What
you.
are the key challenges and rewards of translating written stories into visual narratives? And how do you really stay true to the essence of the original work, if at all?
Well, well, I love doing book adaptations, and I mean, to me, that's been the lifeblood of my career so far. Is doing things like Ultimate Gift, Extraordinary and Indivisible. All of those were either true stories or based on books, and I love that kind of work. It's fun not having to start on a totally blank page. But I'm probably one of those writers who would err on the side of being more faithful sometimes than a producer may want me to be, especially like on my writer for hire projects, because I try as much as possible to use as everything I possibly can that is in the original that is useful. But the best way for me so far has been, especially with the true stories, is when I can, trying to meet the real people and interview them. Like there were some things during Indivisible that had I not had that meeting in person with that married couple, there would have been things that would not have made that film, because I asked them questions like silly memories from the past and the kinds of things that would have never made a book or an article. And some of that actually ended up in the story and enriched their relationship. So I love when I can do that and bring that authenticity to it. And at the same time, we have to remember we're doing a movie and we have to telescope time. And like I have one true story that I worked on that had 6 siblings on both sides of the family. And I'm like, I can't have 12 characters and have to hire 12 actors to play all these people. So I talked to the family about, in that script, I'm like, can I telescope a little and have 3 siblings on each side so we can make better roles for actors who want to show up and play? Because nobody wants to be in an ensemble of 6 people on each side of a family, because you can write deeper if you have it smaller. But I want to give a great example from Tim's manuscript. Like whenever I would read his book, I would find things that we could put in the show. And one of my favorite things is that he took from his mom's life. Louise was his mother's name, and we use that for the grandmother's name in our show. And she would get a new Bible every year and date it and write notes because she wanted to read the Bible fresh every year. And I was like, that's a brilliant thing to give our character, Eliana, following in her mother Louise's footsteps in the show. And so when you can bring in that authenticity, it's great, because sometimes if you have a book, for example, that's famous and you depart away from it, you're going to really tick off that fan base.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I try to be faithful, but also I have to keep in mind what the craft is of television is very different than books. We know it. We've written over 50 books between the two of us, and we know there are massive differences between what you can get away with in a novel versus what you can get away with in the script.
Right.
Susan, as someone with extensive experience in directing and producing, how do you approach directing episodes with a supernatural drama differently to other genres, and does it bring up any challenges?
It does. And for me, it starts with recognizing that real life is a supernatural drama. That dimension does exist.
Yeah.
And embracing that as part of life, instead of looking at the supernatural as like something that's science fiction. No, it is fact. It's something that exists. And so all we have to do is portray real life, honestly. But of course, the challenge is to translate our awareness of that spiritual realm into a narrative that has the ring of truth and is never hokey. And there's nothing that seems false or fake about it, because in my experience and Cheryl's, we've had these supernatural experiences, and we've seen that they are so naturally supernatural. And it's the kind of thing that it still amazes us every single time, like we say in the script, but it's very lifelike to us. And of course, there are, as far as challenges are concerned, there are the challenges of the constraints of budget and time and all of that stuff. But the main challenge for us is spiritual, is to just recognize that spiritual world and to let that flow through us in a context that we see very much in a glass darkly. It's literally a walk of faith to do this, and it keeps us dependent, because we never know what's going to happen. It's writing a script, directing, it's a living thing. And you never know what's going to happen. And so we have to, there's this stepping faith, because I'm limited. I don't know all the answers. And so I'm going into a situation where I don't know what's going to happen, what this person's needs are going to be or that. And I just have to trust that the answers are going to come at the right time. And I find in the end that I realized that I would never want to work any other way. I would never want to live any other way.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear that. And around that, like artists, this is for any of you, but artists often struggle with finding their unique voice. How
Mm.
did you both separately develop your creative voice, and how have you continued to refine it, especially with working on such diverse projects like these stones?
Right. Well, and this is cool for both of us to answer
Mm.
in the sense that um, the collaboration that we have a chance to have has been really, really fun, but it didn't start with these stones. We have been writing and trading scripts and giving notes and trading back. And I mean, for a couple of decades, I believe,
Yeah.
so that part has been really fun. And doing this one together was a real dream come true. And it's like, say, in the beginning of our development process, I was working on the show Bible and coming up with the stories and trying to brainstorm the season as a whole, and just to see how all of those pieces are going to fit together to make a first season. Because as you know, we did 6 episodes for that, and we needed an arc that goes over the whole thing. But as we were looking at that, it's like we only had 24 pages an episode to work with,
Mm.
and we needed to focus those stories. And yet we had a lot of characters to service. We had the family track, and then we had the guest star cast track with the Bible and all that. But we wanted to make sure we picked a theme that fit every episode. But even in coming up with what voice did I want to use, in some cases I chose my actors first, which is not always the case. But because we were going to make this independently, it was important to pick people that we thought would come play,
Yeah.
and would help us, like because we weren't funded yet. So we thought, well, let's bring some really strong people to the table that we could go to investors and say, hey, these people believe in this and they want to play with us. And so the examples of that would be like Madeline Carroll from I Can Only Imagine,
Yeah.
Aaron Abercrombie from War Room, and Cameron Arnett from also, I guess they're both doing The Forge that comes out right now in August here. And then Catherine Shepler, the singer from our 4th episode. I knew I wanted them first. So I refined my voice in working on their stories to who I knew they were and what I knew they were wonderful at playing at. And then Susan knew Charlene,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
who plays McKenna's mom.
No, and love Charlene.
I
Yeah.
love her
So
too.
she was really informative in terms of working on her character, because she had been working with her as sometimes an actor coach and all that before. And so, but one of the things I have to throw her way is that she knows the Bible better than me. And she would like be able to take those Bible characters and adjust how they talked to our people in ways that I never could have done on my own. And do you want to speak to that at all about
Yeah,
how you worked
Susan.
on those Bible interactions?
Well, it all
Yeah.
goes back to seeing and relating to them as human beings, and diving into the moment of who they are and how they live and how they would have spoken. And for me, that was such a joy to find the connectivity between whatever Bible character it was and the people they would be interacting with, the present day people. And for us, in terms of constructing the script, we had to ask ourselves, who's the best Bible character? Who's the right courier, we call them,
I like that.
to best serve the narrative? And we've got 2 narratives going on. We have the episode specific one with the people who are being helped, but we also have the overall arc of the McKenna, the Stewart family narrative going on.
Yeah.
And the whole first season represents a lot of growth in McKenna's life. She's going from a place that she had been, hearing her mother say some things that sounded kind of crazy. Her interactive relationship with God and the very committed life of faith that she was leading to, work with these Bible people to help other people. And it all sounded kind of delusional to her until it starts happening to her.
Yeah.
And so she has to go from this place of sort of having this arm's length relationship, sort of belief in God, to a head knowledge per se, to realizing, I need to think about how far I'm going to step into this myself. And so she's just starting on this journey into that. And so we have to serve where she is on it too. And each stone that she's getting builds on the next. And the first stone she got in the first episode, for example, was listen. And in the second episode, the stone is going to be grow. And so we're serving that, and we were thinking, okay, who's the courier? And you were struggling with that question.
Yeah.
Because
we knew like Hannah would relate to the mom who's overprotective,
right?
But we wanted to be a little off center,
right?
Instead, and not choose Hannah,
right? And we refer to Hannah in there. In a way, we get both. Yeah. But as far as who's in there, we realized that in terms of McKenna's growth, that she needs to go from just seeing the Bible as a book, with pages, into seeing that it's living and active in her life. And Samuel was the perfect person who kind of stumbled into hearing from God, an interactive relationship with God himself, the whole story of how God's calling him in the night, and he's running to Eli and say, "What's going on?
Calling me?" Well, and Samuel, for your listeners, is Hannah's son, who she had to release to God's service.
Right. And so we realized it's like,
he's the better choice. He's a little off center, but it was a better show because we did that.
He really served McKenna to teach her how to start to listen for God's voice and see what God is doing. Yeah. At the same time as it helped Samuel to relate to Holly. Yeah. So that made the decision.
And what was cool about our voices and how to merge those, going back to your question, was like, because she's been my writing mentor for, is it 30 years now or something like that? We already have very similar styles and taste. And so like even though I had started all the scripts, and because that was my job, I was able to bring her in. Like I would write all of the drafts, and I would do 6 drafts for myself before I would let her see it.
And if I can interject, God gave her such a great foundation. I've been amazed, frankly. I mean, she doesn't know I'm going to say this.
Cheryl blushes.
I was amazed at how, he's helped her to just to throw out the bones, and then it's like Ezekiel, the dry bone of the structure, and then just start fleshing it out and breathing on it and giving it life. And so she did all of that heavy lifting before I even got involved.
Yeah, it was nice because I would do those drafts, and then I would give it to her next, and I needed to move on to the next episode, but I would ask her, I'm like, okay, look at what I did. Is it ready for you to polish and deepen and do all this work to it? And can I move on to the next episode? And I think almost every time the answer was yes. Because if it had been structurally unsound, she would have made me do all that work first before. But most of the times I was like, pass it on. Okay, right. Pass it on. But she did such a great job also deepening stuff for the actors to play.
Well, and it would come to me, and it was always in such good shape that it's time for me to not think, oh, okay, I'm just going to go here and make this better. It's like, okay, God, how do you want me to speak? And so often what I would do is I would read the script, and then I would pray about it, sleep on it.
Yeah.
Because there would be certain things that I think, well, I would identify areas that I'd like to, see what we could do with these things. And then by morning, the inspiration would be there. And it almost felt like taking dictation from God, but it's like he would bring the characters to life to me. Mm-hmm. And there was at that point when we're seeing the biblical characters in that human way, then it's just a matter of listening for how they're going to react to each other and what they're going to say.
Right. I love that you talked about not just sort of diving in that hustle, but really getting into that creative flow, going to bed with a prayer and waking up in the ease of it. Not that it's always easy, but that's just a beautiful reminder to everybody with creativity that it does come better from that restful place and from
So
even
much
that
better.
meditation space, even that prayer space, whatever it is for the individual listening. But that stillness is actually really powerful too, really incredible. Yeah. You've written, Cheryl, children and adult content, not adult as in bad.
Yeah, let's qualify that.
Just to clarify that. Very G-rated.
Yes.
So how does your approach differ when you're writing to these different audiences, and how do you make sure, if it's applicable, that the messages in your story resonate to as broader audience as
Yeah.
possible?
Yeah, like, well, I have written a lot of kids materials, so sometimes, like, if I'm writing for a preschool audience, I'll watch preschool shows first because I actually have to
Cute.
retrain my brain.
Yeah.
She's a research hound.
I can
Yeah,
tell she's a researcher, a
yeah.
visceral one too, because she's been down to graveyards and things. Yeah.
Oh, yes, I do. Yeah, I forgot that. I did another podcast with her and told her I
Oh,
walked to graveyards and acted out a
yes.
scene to write during Ultimate
Yes.
Gifts of Writer's Block.
Yeah.
So,
Mm.
but yeah, so on like Superbook though, that was for a little bit older kids, like maybe 8 to 12. So that was a lot easier to write than preschool. But what I loved about it is there were so many episodes that existed that I could watch that were already great
Yeah.
by other writers. So I
So
could
true.
study their scripts, I could study their shows. And so every time I got a new writing assignment from them, because I got to write 5 of them, I would just binge watch. My husband would watch it with me because we love the show. We actually find it entertaining for adults.
Yeah, it's really great. I love it too.
So that was nice. But as far as just adults, young adults, I kind of consider the young adult, like upper teens on through adults, like our show is geared toward. I just try to get into the head of what is going to move me. Like when I'm writing, if I'm laughing and if I'm crying, then I feel like that audience is going to have that similar reaction. So I just try to make sure that as I'm working on something, I'm not an actress anymore, but I will act out my stuff as I'm going. And so I figure if it's moving me, then it's going to hopefully move at least some people in the audience. They may be moved by a different part of an episode than someone else. You never know where someone's coming from, that they may take something different. But mainly we just I just tried to choose for this show in particular, just human and relatable issues that we all have been through. If it's not today, it'll be tomorrow, or it might have been yesterday. That way it's going to speak to them on some level. That is going to relate to them. And the other genre I love is romantic comedies because, it's that dream of finding love. Like I had that. That's what Never the Bride was
Hallmark
about
binge
before I
watch
found
me.
Chris. But yeah, so it's like it just kind of depends on what is relatable to the audience, and I hope it's going to speak to them.
Really, really love that, and I love Superbook as well. It's so
I hope
fun.
your kids love it, not just you.
Yeah. Susan, tell me too. Artistic expression often involves drawing from personal experiences and writing as well, and emotions. Can you share how your personal story, and Cheryl, you're welcome to jump in here, as individuals and creatives have influenced the stories you tell, not just in these stones, but in anything that you've actually created?
Well, life is such a great resource, and it, sometimes we think of our lives in terms of, okay, these are all the good things that happen to me, these are all the bad things that happen to me, but I find that God can use all of it. And when we're trying to have a living, breathing thing, script, film, whatever, we're drawing, our lives are all over it. There's really there's quite a bit of us in all of these characters, because we're drawing from life, from what we feel and what we know is true of life, and we're putting it on the page together in an atmosphere of real trust. And so there's a lot of us in each chapter of the book. We have a study guide that goes along with we'll talk about later. But there's a lot of us in each character and in each chapter of the book where we study it. And I've been there. I may not have been a cutter, or I wasn't an opioid addict, things like that. But there are things that are true of the human condition in general that apply to all of us, and that we're drawing from our lives. And Cheryl, for example, drew heavily from her life, and I'll let you speak to that
Yeah.
for episode 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, tell
So,
us about that.
well, when God first was directing my team with Jeanette to consider creating These Stones as a series, that's when I felt that little nudge from God that was like, it's time to tell your story. And initially there would be that resistance of like, oh, this is so private. This was the story that I never wanted to be my story in the first place. This was the story that I kept off Facebook. Like, I can write whatever on Facebook and, talk about challenges. This was the one I never posted about, not one time. And it was my husband and I's battle with infertility in our marriage. It was probably what I would call the darkest cloud that followed us throughout that at least 8 years of our marriage. And we had a wonderful marriage in every other way except that obviously very important piece. And so I had a lot of medical challenges that came up over the years, and I had a lot of hope and I had a lot of faith, and I just kept assuming that God was going to come through according to my prayers and according to my name it and claim it verses that I kept saying over and over again, like, you're going to move mountains, Lord, and you're going to take care of this. And, children are a heritage from God. And when you add that verse to the move mountains, it's like you just assume that God's going to comply with your demands. And so at the time of 8 years of hoping and praying and counting and really assuming he was going to use this as the big miracle payoff.
Yeah.
And that unfortunately was not the plan. However, in that, by the time this project came forward, I had already given up hope. I'd already had to succumb to surgery that ended all hope that it was ever going to happen for us because of all the medical things that had gone on. And I thought I was going to be healed the day of surgery. I thought, that's that's the end. But no, that's kind of when anger sets in. And I wasn't to that point of accept yet. And accept is the theme of the episode that we wrote. But we decided to send Sarah in as a courier to be there for the girl, played by Erin Bethea from Fireproof. That, because I can't play myself. I did the episode, but having Sarah show up, you think the message is going to be this time next year you'll have a baby, because that's the message that Sarah got. But even within the episode, Sarah finds out her assignment is not what she thought it was, and she wants to quit at one point. But what I learned throughout writing that was the rest of my healing. That was me coming to that place of acceptance that a no is a gift. Because even if it wasn't what I wanted, sometimes when you get a no from God, it's your way of being able to move forward. Because living with hope, like the hope deferred verse talks about, it makes the heart sick. If that's never going to happen, it's so much better to not have that hope in something that's got a no attached to it. So that's what we were able to do with that episode. And like, so far, like when the actors read the 6 scripts before we shot, there were quite a few who said, that's my favorite episode. That's the most real. That's the one that's going to help people. And we found the same thing in some of our early screenings of it. So I'm glad I was willing. It was hard to do, and it's hard to talk about because this is our first time going public about it.
And it's very vulnerable. I wonder too if you were watching those scenes as they were being filmed, and did that emotionally kind of tear you apart to watch that?
No, it was kind of cool. Like, our very first scene we shot the first day of the whole shoot was my nurse scene, where I'm in that waiting room with the girl waiting on the results of her tumor sizing and did it change. That happened to me. I was watching all these people in real life walk around me with their sonograms, and I had my sonogram, but it was of a tumor. And it was like watching, I'm in the scene. It's the first scene of the day. I'm like, oh, this is cool. I've got my purple scrubs on and I'm pretending to be a nurse. It was not emotional for me at all. It was really, it showed me that I had healed through writing it.
Yeah, and you're able to look at it from that bird's eye view. Like, it's not my reality anymore, but it was my reality. I love that. I love the perspective change that God has us go through in healing. Susan, your career spans various roles in the industry, from writing to directing to producing. I think I've even read acting. What advice would you give to artists who want to diversify their skill set and take on multiple creative roles when what we hear so often is niche down? Would you say that's absolute rubbish?
Rubbish.
Well, I would say that, at least for me, I have found that all the crafts involved inform each other. And so for me, I started at the very bottom. I knew where I was headed because I'd heard from the Lord about it. I knew I was going to be a director specifically. But I had to walk through that in real life, and I didn't have any experience. I didn't have any ambition in that area, nothing. But I followed him in starting to get work in that area to learn how to do that craft. And I'd been trying to get a job, and they finally called me for my first job, and they said, "Yeah, we want you to start Monday, and we want you to be a PA." And I said, "Great, what's a PA?" I had no idea of anything. But what I said, "What does a PA do?" And they said, "Well, kind of everything." And it turned out to be the perfect place to learn all the different functions. I did hair and makeup. I did, um, I learned how to run a camera a little bit. I did all the different things. And so I sat under ADs and directors. And so I was in this place where I wasn't too terribly dangerous, where I could absorb all the things that I needed to know how to do, so that I would know how to eventually become a director who is working with all of these people. And then once I had become a director, I found out, oh, if nobody's going to be coming to you to say direct things, the kind of things that I wanted to direct,
content wise.
Yeah.
I had to sort of develop it myself. So then it was going to somebody and saying, "Well, how do you do this?" And then you say, you write a treatment. What's a treatment? And just going, but not only asking about it or studying writing, but actually doing it, because you have to do these things, to really learn them.
Yeah.
As I'd already been a director, I'd been working on a daytime drama for a while, when I realized, what, I need to become an actor to really get trained, but actually go through the audition process, actually, get the role, be on set, and be hustled through and cry on cue, and, all the things that actors experience, or not get the role, and know what that feels like. And so, I would say whatever your main focus is, whatever is in your heart, that's what I really want to do. Do all of them.
I love that.
Explore all the others in a very committed, intentional way, and you're going to grow across the board, because you never know what pieces you're going to need. I needed the right piece, right?
I love how you've answered that.
Everything I know. I'm glad she learned that part.
Exactly. And I know, Cheryl, that you've gone through a lot of different hats. And I know you shared in our earlier episode we did together that you were an actor, but you were like, "But I couldn't act," or something funny like that.
Well, I got kicked out of an acting program because I wasn't any good. But I'm glad I learned about it, because I do act when I write, but I'm alone. There's no audience. So I'm great. I'm really good when I act alone in a room.
Yeah, and she has to do that to be able to have her dialogue have the life that it does.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I love that. I love all of that experience that you're bringing, and there's permission to be multifaceted and embrace that. That's great. All right, for both of you, whoever wants to answer this, These Stones involves Bible characters helping people in the modern world, which we've alluded to and talked about. How do you make such a profound concept relatable to today's audience? And Susan, you've talked a little about this, so expand on that, but especially to that younger viewer who, maybe haven't come across faith before and are encountering this content for the first time.
Well, it's funny. I don't really feel like we have to make them relatable, because they already are.
That's great.
Once you see them for who they are. And so it's on us to really see them and hear them as they actually are, and as they actually live through the living and active word. And when we see them eye to eye like that, there's this kinship immediately. It's like when you see somebody that you know really well and you haven't seen them for a long time, or even if you meet someone who you have a kindred spirit with spiritually, And there's this kinship immediately.
Mm-hmm.
You speak each other's language.
Mm.
And for us, as far as finding the biblical characters and finding their humanity and their personalities and all of those things, Cheryl did Miriam. That she really,
That's Karen Abercrombie's character.
Yeah, beautiful.
yeah, I mean, she really got that voice.
Mm-hmm.
She heard that voice and put that on. And I don't remember really touching Miriam much.
I love when she gets sarcastic with them and when she argues with them, and it's fun.
Yeah.
And when she also has grace, like in our 4th episode, like to bring it to the young kids. I knew I wanted, the first episode I knew I wanted to write was the 4th one, and that was our teenager episode.
Mm.
And it's like my heart breaks for kids today who are growing up in a world where promiscuity is celebrated and is encouraged, and you are made fun of if you're not interested in sex before marriage or being a lot of multiple partners or whatever.
Mm.
And so the first story I knew I wanted to write was Katie's. And I love diving into an issue like becoming a cutter, having self-esteem issues. And then what does it do emotionally to erode your self-esteem when you choose to give yourself to somebody when it wasn't even what that character wanted to do in the first place, but did it to keep the guy?
Mm.
And I thought, well, if we have stories like that with the window into the younger point of view, that will help us bring in those younger people to know that, I mean, I love Rahab shows up and it's like, I was a prostitute. There is no judgment here, and then having McKenna as Caroline Carroll's character as the other arc of the whole season was also a good way to have a window into the younger point of view.
What you're sharing is so interesting because I feel like the church as a whole has been judged as very judgmental of anybody that's got these human tendencies. And of course, that doesn't apply to every church and every person. And I'm always careful with that. But what you've done is really show humanity and that all of us are capable of things we wouldn't know in the right circumstances. And it takes that judgment away, which I really love that you were brave to go into places where a lot of faith-based work won't dare tread for fear of criticism. But the human condition is so raw in it. And I've loved that in every single episode.
Tell me going back to her episode, episode 3. That's hard because people, especially in the faith-based space, sometimes are hesitant to approach a situation where God says no. But the fact is that is the real life faith walk.
That's so real.
And that's why people who have not been in the struggle of infertility or in sexual sin or whatever, but particularly about the no, that's where people related to that show, because the people who are coming up to Cheryl and saying that show meant the most to us aren't necessarily people who were infertile, but they are people who have experienced a no from God.
Yeah, that got me too. I think I even emailed Cheryl straight after and commented. I was like, I was waiting for the happy ending. I expected a happy ending and I didn't get it. I don't want to make a spoiler alert, but I think we already spoiled that a while ago.
Like when we did a screening at a film festival where it was up for an award, that episode, somebody came up to me after and said, I was so afraid you were going to give them a yes. He's like, thank you for daring to tell the no. Yeah. And I was like, well, that's kind of what we want to do. But I don't find it hopeless at the end either, though.
No.
I think that when Sarah says to her, take this no as the gift it's meant to be, I do honestly believe that it is a gift.
Yeah. And it's so interesting for all of the people, and that's many of us that have had no's and disappointment and live with that, to still be able to move forward in wholeness and realize that's an answer too, and it's okay. That it's okay. It's really, really powerful, and well done for being so brave, and especially since it's your story. Cheryl, on that, screenwriting often requires collaboration, and I know we talked about this earlier in your first episode, but collaborating with Susan, for example, directors, producers, how do you keep your creative vision while, I see you two collaborating so beautifully and giving each other input, but how do you keep your vision when maybe that collaboration's not always easy?
Right. Well, normally, like my whole writing career before these stones was writer for hire jobs. And I mean, even though a lot of times writers write spec scripts and they want to make stuff like it, for us, it's Never the Bride would be hopefully in the near future. But
Yeah.
most of the time, you don't sell those. Those are your samples and they hire you and it's their project.
Mm.
They're the ones who knew the true people. They're the ones who own the rights to the book. They come to you and say, please write this. So you don't really have a say in the sense of preserving creative vision. Like you may have ideas for how you wish it would come out. Sometimes it comes out beautifully. Sometimes it looks very different. It can be very different every job.
Yeah.
But These Stones was different because I was also invited in as a creator producer and showrunner. That I had a lot more creative say in how it happened. But that was because I have wonderful partners in Stone Impact Media who were the ones who were able to help put all this together, even Mike and Jeanette finding the project to begin with to say, hey, can we look at this? But between her, her husband, Sam, and Mike, the four of us formed Stone Impact to say, we want to do things differently. We don't want Hollywood telling us what to do with our stories. We want to make it and own it and then sell it later so we can make the show that we want. And then the next wonderful collaborator we brought to the table was Susan, because I couldn't imagine doing anything without her. And at first that was just in my writing staff, helping me as our co-executive producer on the writing team. But later it was like, she has to direct this. But doing that and finding someone with the same voice and creative vision really matters. Because if you hire a director, a lot of times like Hollywood, some people can have egos. And if you hire a director who just says, now it's time for me to make this mine, get rid of the writer, it's mine now. And it's like, we didn't want any of that. We don't want egos. I don't want it even to be mine. I want it to be ours in the collective whole. And like my show wouldn't be what it is without her. So it's like, and without my team, with my Stone Impact team, and then all the people we brought to the table, all the crew. So that collaboration works. But I also think it's important to vet people and say, do you want to tell the same story that we want to tell? Because if they don't, and they just say, well, I'm going to come in and rescue it and I'm going to make it different because you need me. That's just not the attitude that we wanted on this kind of a project. So my advice for anyone in that position is at least find, like, I have no interest in directing, but at least find a director that wants to tell the same story that you do. Like with Never the Bride that we've been collaborating on for 20, maybe not 20. Since 2006. So it's close to 20 is when I first came up with the idea for Never the Bride in 2006. And she's been a part of every draft. I mean, I think we're on 40, 50, who knows what draft we're on.
Incredible.
We've said no to no less than 15 or 20 opportunities to make it because we could tell that the people with the purse strings did not want to make the same movie. And the number one thing would be like, God's a character in it, like Bruce Almighty. But one of the worst notes we got was, could you diminish God's role? And we said no. And it's like, because that's what we have to do. We have to steward that one. So
I love that. I love that you've got the integrity. You're not so desperate that, you have to just hand off your work, that you protect it because you have an intention for it. I love that. Yeah. Susan, you've directed a lot of well-known series. I think I read about Sweet Valley High and Bones, if I'm not incorrect. Yeah. How do you approach directing for TV series with an established fan base versus a completely new one like these Stones?
Well, I loved the blank canvas that these Stones gave me.
That's a good metaphor.
And I can understand why some directors want to come in and just make it their vision. But for me, I love the village that it takes. I find that if I limit it to my vision, it's not going to be as alive in other people's hearts or as good as if I would, expand it to someone else's vision. And of course, it starts with a great concept. Thank you, Tim and Peggy. And then an inspired showrunner like Cheryl to just craft this great, blueprint for this whole series. And then, but every step of the way, I remember before I directed my first film, Anson Williams gave me a piece of advice. And he said, I'm going to tell you exactly what everything Ron Howard told me before I directed my first thing. And I said, great. And
Anson is Potsy on Happy Days for those who are following along.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah.
And anyway, he said, one of the things that Ron told me is always remember that a great idea can come from anywhere. And I have found that so true over the years, collaborating with the whole team and just watching God give other people a chance to put their vision into it. Like, for example, on these stones, we have this time when McKenna gets unexpectedly sort of snatched away to Central Dispatch, where
The supernatural portal
yeah,
area where she gets her assignments,
yeah, and the production designer Erin Day came up to me right before we were shooting the scene, and she said, "Wouldn't it be fun if when she goes, she's on her way to take a shower? Wouldn't it be fun if she's got her toothbrush in her hand and her little toiletries bag, and then whoosh, and there she is in Central Dispatch all of a sudden, and she's still got her toothbrush." It just gave that.
Yeah.
And it was like, I was like, yes, that's wonderful. And so that's what we did it.
It's such a funny moment.
Those little
so funny.
tiny details that wouldn't have happened in an atmosphere where I'm trying to just limit it. And it opens it up. And so not only to me, and I love that moment as a part of the collective whole, but it gives, I'm sure every time Erin would see that show, it gives her that point of joy that she's contributed something wonderful.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's so great. And it takes such humility.
Those kinds of things.
Yeah. And you don't start with that level of humility, do you? Maybe you did, but I feel like my I've got more humble as I've gone along and learnt things the hard way and had some edges rubbed off, and slowly sort of got to know myself better, got to know God better, and then I've arrived at this place that's much easier to work with. Would you say you've been through something similar, or always were easy to work with?
I can say she's always been easy to work with, and I met her in the mid-90s. So
Red gem.
Well, I have learned along the way, and I mean, this gray hair has to be good for something, right? It has to be good as I'm getting older, and that's one of them, is that iron really does sharpen iron, and we do learn and grow along the way. And
that's true. That's true. And having that confidence and that restful state that you carry so beautifully, Susan, is a real testimony to the level of work that you're doing from that place. It's beautiful to watch. Anyone can answer this next one. This is a last major question. Then we're going to dive into how we can actually get our eyes, ears, and everything into these gorgeous resources. But many artists struggle with self-doubt and pressure to create something perfect. And how do you both overcome these challenges in your work? And what advice would you give to artists trying to bring their stories to life?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think we definitely can both speak to this. I'll just start that, nothing is ever going to be perfect. So even though we may have that pressure put on ourselves, it will never be perfect. It will never be done. I mean, there's a joke about how there's 3 movies: the one you write, the one you film, and the one you edit. And you never know, even in distribution, if something might change. But I always like to say God's my co-writer. And I invite him to the table and I pray. And it's some of my best moments with God are when we're writing together. However, he is not inspiring me to write the Bible. So it's not an infallible word. And so he refines me through the rewrite process. And so just knowing that is going to be the fact that it's going to be refined along with me. It's like, I feel like I grow through every script that I write because I treat it as if it's not perfect. But the self-doubt part of your question, that can come in when I think my worst moments is the joy of getting a new job. And I always start it with that, oh no, can I do it? And I'll even say, we always vent to her, I'm like, I don't know if I could do this job. She's like, yeah, you'll be fine. But I'm glad I have that. And because it's not a bad fear, it's a humbleness that says, I can't do this alone. And I'm going to need God's help. And probably hers. And like a lot of times, there's very few things I've ever written that went to a client before she saw it, unless I was on a confidentiality agreement, because I know I'm imperfect and I know I have blind spots that I need help with. And so that's how I deal with that side of the self-doubt, is that I don't work on an island.
Well, and it works both ways, really, because and we saw this a lot in we co-wrote the finale. And
Yeah, I asked her to co-write the finale because I created all these questions that I didn't know the answers to.
I love that.
I'm like, Susan, I can't figure this out. Would you help? And so she actually took we actually divided out the scenes in the outline. And I said, you take those scenes, I'll take these scenes that I feel more confident about. And then we trade pages.
we trade pages, and it's in an atmosphere of real trust, because when we're pouring our hearts out onto the page, of course we fall in love with our words and we fall in love with the way we saw it, and then we get the other person's notes back, and we realize, wow, it's not. There's okay, I need to work on this.
Yeah.
But I trust her to. I need her to look at what I've written and say, work on this part a little bit more, or this is a problem area to refine. And then we would trade back and forth in this atmosphere of real trust. But if I could speak for a moment to actors, because self-doubt and anxiety are the mortal enemies of the creative freedom that we need to go beyond acting to living in the role, which is essential to me. Yeah. Self-doubt, what it does is it binds us up in thoughts about ourselves. It binds us up. It makes us a prisoner to our own minds and unable to lift off into the moment of the character. And that, for me, really equates to stepping out in faith, launching into that moment, going into the unknown. And that's what sets us free to live in the moment, which is what actors really want to do. But I think we need to realize that there is value to be mined out of the mistakes that we made, because self-doubt is created because we're afraid we're going to be seen as less than, afraid we're going to make a mistake, afraid we're going to embarrass ourselves, or whatever is going to happen. People will think badly of us, whatever it is. But what we need to do is let those mistakes, that self-doubt be our teacher, and to go and talk to God about it, and just say, I'm feeling this. This is how I'm feeling. Talk to me about this, Lord, and help me understand. And will you please teach that? Will you please teach me through this? I was on a particular set shooting a movie, and there were things that were just going really, in difficult directions. And I remember my casting director walked up to me, and she said, I felt like to give you this. This is this devotional I read this morning. I don't even know what it was from, but what I do remember about it is it said, it was one of those things where it was like God talking straight to you, and said, when these things happen, say to yourself, this is for my education. Let that moment of doubt, insecurity, whatever you're having, let that be an educational moment, and value that moment that self-doubt presents, because it gives you that chance to connect with God and hear the truth. Self-doubt will tell you lies. God will tell you the truth. And if you let him use those mistakes as your teachers, you're never going to walk away empty-handed.
I really love that. Thank you for sharing that too, both because I am an actor, multifaceted person, not a director. I've done musical theater directing, but hearing that, because there's always these moments of intense stress, and there can be moments where you see somebody's ego fly, but being able to just sit back and say, what are you trying to teach me? What's the lesson in this? And take a deep breath. That's the beauty. I love that so much. All right, ladies, where can we watch this masterpiece? These Stones, where is it available?
There's a streaming service. Up Entertainment has a cable station, and they have a streaming service. So we are going to launch on the streaming service. It's called Up Faith and Family. And we even have a coupon code for your listeners who want to get 30% off their first month.
Oh, yes, please.
It's Stones 30. So these Stones, the word Stones 30. I think Stones is in all caps.
But they'll be able 30, the number.
Yes. Yeah. And so it's going to be launching on September 5th. That's our first episode. And every Thursday is going to be, they'll make the next episode available for the first 6 weeks through October 10th. And then after that, I mean, all 6 of them will be available after that. But our hope is that everyone will watch as it unfolds to help the excitement and to start talking about it online, start sharing about it online.
Yeah.
And then we also have a book that we co-wrote.
Yeah, this is literally hot off the presses. In fact, it's still sort
the first copy.
Yeah, these Stones devotional, right? Yes.
But what we want with these stones is to go beyond an entertainment series into a life experience and activating the deeper themes, the virtues that this talks about, the living in interactive relationship with God, loving each other, helping each other. And so we together again, I love that we did this together.
Yes.
We created this book, this study guide, so that individuals and groups, I know there are a lot of church groups that are going to get involved in this, can go through this study guide together and really dive into the deeper themes and challenges of living life in reality in this kind of way with God. So, this is going to be on Amazon.
Yeah, paperback, hardback, and ebook. We'll have them
very cool
all for sure by September 1st. So
that's very cool. Thank you, ladies, for your incredible creative contributions to the world. Like you add in so much value in so many areas, and there's a lot of, when we get self-absorbed as creatives, I don't think we give the way that you two are giving. And I love that you're so others-centered with your art and your creativity, and just I honor that. And I hope that you're sitting there with the popcorn and put your feet up and watch the episodes as they come out. I don't know if that's even possible psychologically for you to do, but
we will.
I'll be
right
watching. Yeah, absolutely. Anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, the last thing that I would like to share, that I love to share on anything when I speak, and from a writing point of view, I always like to share that there's power in the pen. And that anyone of your listeners who are writers, to make sure that they're really careful about what they're writing, and because they are going to influence people, and that then extends over to directing and producing. So if anyone's in a creative field, you really should be asking yourself, when someone watches this, how do I want them to respond? And am I influencing them for good or bad? And to really care about that part of it.
Yeah, that's so true. And I hope that question's getting asked more. So that's a very good encouragement, because there's a huge responsibility in the pen. And I love that you said that. Anything else, ladies, or shall we?
Just thank you, Laura.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for partnering with us to get this message out.
Thank you both. Phew, today's masterclass is done. I love reaching back and saying, I've done this, and helping you learn the easy way. If you want more, head to laurabiancapilcher.com for show notes, links, freebies, my blog, coaching and courses, and you can also head to my socials, Laura Bianca Pilcher on Instagram and Facebook. I'm also on Twitter and Pinterest. Thanks again for listening. Please leave a review on Apple Podcasts. That would mean the world to me. And of course, keep on living the healthy, wealthy, wise artist living towards your dream life. Bye, friends. P.S. Shout out to my hottie hubby, Andrew Pilcher, who does all the editing on this podcast.